My husband's mother didn't raise her voice. She didn't hit me. She didn't even insult me directly. She just took everything, one piece at a time. My phone, my money, my choices. And she smiled while doing it. She thought I was alone. She thought I had nowhere to go. She had no idea that my father was watching. When people talk about control, they imagine shouting, rules written on walls, anger that leaves bruises. But real control is quieter. It sounds like, "I'm only doing this for your good." A good wife doesn't need privacy. You should be grateful we even accepted you. That's how my life disappeared. And this is how they lost everything. I married Daniel thinking I was marrying a man. I didn't know I was marrying a system. The first week. The house was beautiful, large, spotless, intimidating. His mother, Margaret, walked me through it like a museum. "This is the living room. We don't eat here. This is the kitchen. I decide the menu. This is your room." She paused. "Our room," she corrected. Daniel laughed like it was a joke. I didn't. 3 days after the wedding, my phone stopped working. Margaret noticed before I did. "Oh dear," she said gently. "You don't need that anymore." I smiled awkwardly. "I need it to talk to my family." She tilted her head. "You're married now. Your family is here." Daniel said nothing. That was the first thing she took. I had savings, not much, but enough to feel safe. Margaret asked me for my bank details for household accounting. I hesitated. Daniel touched my arm. "It's normal," he said. "Mom handles everything." The next morning, my account was empty. Transferred. Legal. Clean. When I asked, Margaret didn't deny it. "A wife doesn't need her own money," she said calmly. "It creates independence." The rules, unwritten, unbreakable. No leaving the house alone. No job. No visitors. No locked doors. No questions.
She never yelled. She didn't have to, because Daniel enforced it. Weeks passed, then months. My name stopped being used. I became Daniel's wife. Her. The girl. At night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe. Margaret's footsteps above me, Daniel's silence beside me, and the voice in my head asking, how did I disappear so quietly? They thought I came from nothing. I never corrected them. Margaret once said, "Your father must be relieved he doesn't have to deal with you anymore." I swallowed my response, because my father taught me something very young. Power doesn't announce itself, it waits. Margaret demanded I sign a document. She said it was just a form. It was a full legal surrender of assets. I read it carefully. Then I signed. She smiled. Daniel smiled. They thought they'd won. That's when I made my first call in 6 months. Not to the police, not to a lawyer, to my father. My father didn't ask questions. He didn't raise his voice. He only said, "Good, now don't do anything else. Let them continue." That was the moment I knew. This house wasn't a prison anymore. It was evidence. My father told me to wait. That was the hardest instruction I'd ever received, because when you're trapped, waiting feels like surrender. But I trusted him, and so I stayed quiet. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. I made breakfast exactly the way Margaret liked it. Not 1 grain of salt extra, not 1 crumb out of place. She noticed. "Good," she said, "you're learning." Daniel kissed my forehead before leaving for work. For the first time in months. They thought obedience had finally broken me. In reality, I had just stopped resisting, and resistance is noisy. Margaret loved order. She loved schedules, ledgers, files, receipts. She believed documentation was power. So when my father quietly arranged for a routine internet upgrade at the house,
paid under a corporate maintenance plan Margaret never read closely, she approved it without question. What she didn't know was that the new system came with something extra, a mirrored server. Every digital movement in that house? Logged. Every financial transfer? Backed up. Every email Margaret sent? Copied. The house had started remembering. I had married a man who looked strong, tall, educated, confident in public. At home, he was small. Margaret controlled him long before she ever touched me. She controlled his accounts, his career decisions, even his friendships. One night, after dinner, I watched him sit across from her like a child. "Your performance bonus came in," Margaret said. I moved it to the family account. Daniel nodded. Didn't ask, didn't protest. That's when I understood something important. Daniel wasn't cruel. He was trained. And trained people don't rebel. They obey. A week later, Margaret slipped. It was small, almost invisible. She accused me of moving a document. I hadn't. But she panicked. Her hand shook as she searched her drawer. Her eyes darted, not at me, but at the walls. For the first time, she looked unsure. I said nothing, but inside I smiled, because guilt recognizes observation. Margaret kept everything. Tax adjustments, property transfers, trust funds shifted under relatives' names, things she believed were untouchable because no one had ever challenged her. But my father didn't challenge. He audited, and what he found was impressive. Decades of quiet manipulation, elderly relatives signing documents they didn't understand, businesses dissolved right before audits, assets moved just in time. She wasn't just controlling, she was criminal. It happened unexpectedly. Margaret criticized the way I folded laundry. "You'll never manage a household properly," she said. "Some women are just background people." Daniel watched, waiting, for me to shrink. Instead, I looked up and said calmly, "You're right, I'm very good at staying in the background." Margaret smiled. She thought it was acceptance. Daniel exhaled, relieved. Neither of them noticed the small red light blinking in the corner of the hallway. 3 days later, Margaret received a call. Her posture changed instantly. "Yes, of course. I didn't realize." She hung up and turned to me. "We're having a guest," she said. "Your father." She said it like an insult, like a reminder of my place. I kept my voice neutral. "When?" "Now." My father didn't arrive with bodyguards, or threats, or raised voices. He walked in like he owned time. Margaret rushed to greet him, overly polite, carefully measured. Daniel stood straighter than I'd ever seen him. My father looked at me last. He didn't hug me, didn't speak. He just nodded, and that nod said, "I see everything." Margaret hosted like a queen defending her throne. Wine poured, smiles stretched. She talked about generosity, about taking care of family. My father listened. Then he asked one question. "How long have you been managing other people's assets without oversight?" The room froze. Margaret laughed nervously. "Oh, it's all very informal." My father placed a folder on the table. It was thick. Receipts, transfers, signatures. Margaret's smile collapsed. Daniel looked at the papers, then at his mother, then at me. For the first time, he realized this wasn't about marriage. This was about exposure. My father didn't accuse. He didn't threaten. He simply said, "You have 2 choices. You can return everything you took, or you can explain it all to people who won't be as patient as I am." Margaret's hands trembled, not with anger, with fear. That night, Margaret didn't sleep. I heard her pacing, shuffling papers, making calls. The house felt different, lighter, like something poisonous had been identified. Daniel knocked on my door at 2 a.m. "I didn't know," he whispered. I believed him, but belief doesn't undo damage. Margaret thought compliance would save her. She was wrong, because my father wasn't there to negotiate. He was there to observe how far she would fall on her own, and she was about to fall much further. Margaret moved fast. People like her always do, because they don't know how to be powerless, only how to avoid it. She was already dressed when I came downstairs. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, like nothing had happened. But her eyes were different. She didn't greet me, didn't criticize, didn't smile. She watched. Margaret had switched from ruler to strategist. By noon, my access was cut. The internet slowed, the house phone went dead, the car keys disappeared. Daniel told me gently, "Mom thinks it's better if you stay home for now." I nodded. Inside, I noted every change, because when people panic, they tighten control, and tight control leaves fingerprints. Margaret didn't stay quiet. She never did. By evening, relatives were calling, concerned, confused. "She's unstable," Margaret told them, "very emotional. Her father is influencing her." She framed herself as the protector, the savior, the victim. It almost worked. Almost. My father let her talk. He let her lie. Then he released documents. Not to the family, to the lawyers. Quietly, precisely. Audits began. Properties flagged. Trusts frozen. Margaret didn't know yet, but the walls were closing in. That night, Daniel snapped. He raised his voice, for the first time in our marriage. "Why didn't you tell me who your father was?" he demanded. I met his eyes. "You never asked." Silence. Then the truth fell out of him. "I don't know how to choose," he said. "She's my mother." I didn't answer, because I was done competing with a woman who wanted him. Margaret's biggest weakness wasn't greed, it was pride. She attended a charity gala 3 days later, uncancelable, unavoidable. She needed to be seen. She smiled for cameras, gave speeches about family values, and then the whisper started. Board members pulled her aside, phones buzzed, faces changed. Someone had filed a complaint, a detailed one, with receipts. Margaret left early, alone. She came home furious, not screaming, cold. "You planned this," she said to me. I didn't deny it. "You signed the papers," I replied calmly. "You moved the money. You made the rules." Daniel stood between us, for once, unsure. Margaret looked at him. "After everything I gave you?" That was the moment he realized her love was conditional, and the price was obedience. That night, Margaret tried to lock me out, changed codes, canceled access, ordered staff to ignore me, but legal ownership had shifted, silently, legally. The house wasn't hers anymore. She found out when her card declined at the gate. I watched from the window as she stood there, confused, angry, shrinking. Margaret called my father, begging, promising, threatening. He listened, then said one sentence. "You controlled her by taking everything. Now you'll learn how it feels to lose it." Click. That night, Daniel packed a bag. "I need time," he said. I nodded, because time doesn't fix what courage avoids. He left, and with him went the last illusion of marriage. Margaret thought the worst was over. She was wrong, because the law hadn't spoken yet, and when it did, it would be loud. Margaret believed reputation was armor. She had worn it for decades. It was about to be stripped away. The summons. It arrived on a Tuesday morning. No drama, no warning. A plain envelope. Inside, a court notice, an audit order, a frozen assets directive. Margaret read it 3 times. Then she laughed. "Ridiculous," she said. "This will disappear." She had made problems disappear before. This one stayed. The first hearing. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grand stage, no shouting, just wood, paper, and quiet authority. Margaret entered like she still belonged everywhere, head high, back straight. Then she saw the faces, not friends, not allies, professionals, unimpressed ones. When documentation replaces denial. Her lawyer spoke confidently, until the judge asked for records. My father's team stood. They didn't speak emotionally. They didn't accuse. They presented timelines, dates, signatures, transfers, patterns that told a story Margaret never thought anyone would read. The room changed. The lie that failed. Margaret claimed misunderstanding. She claimed trust. She claimed she was protecting family interests. The judge asked one question: why were funds moved the day before audits? She had no answer. Silence isn't innocence, it's exposure. Daniel takes the stand. He hadn't planned to, but his name was everywhere in the paperwork. He sat down, looking smaller than ever. They asked him if he understood the transactions. He hesitated, then said quietly, "No." The word landed heavy, because it meant something worse: consent without understanding. The moment I spoke. I wasn't required to testify, but I asked to. Margaret's eyes widened. I didn't accuse her. I described process, how control was normalized, how consent was pressured, how silence was rewarded. The courtroom listened, because abuse doesn't need bruises, it needs witnesses. The decision. The judge didn't rule immediately, but the message was clear. Further investigation ordered, temporary control removed, independent oversight installed. Margaret wasn't in charge anymore. She walked out slower than she entered, without speaking to anyone. The fallout. News travels fast when it smells blood. Boards distanced themselves. Charities removed her name. Invitations stopped coming. Margaret's world didn't explode. It emptied. And emptiness is harder to survive. Daniel's return. He came back days later, different, quieter. "I see it now," he said. "All of it." I believed him, but clarity after damage is still late. The house without her. Margaret moved out, not dramatically, just gone. Rooms felt bigger, air lighter. For the first time, I locked a door, just because I could. Margaret thought losing power was the punishment. She didn't realize the real consequence was still coming, because some things aren't handled by courts, they're handled by truth, and truth was about to go public. Margaret believed she could survive anything as long as the story stayed private. She was wrong, because the truth doesn't need volume, it just needs daylight. It appeared on a quiet Sunday morning, not a headline screaming scandal, a feature, carefully written, legally clean, impossible to ignore. It spoke of long-term financial mismanagement within a respected family trust. No names in the title, but every name in the details. Margaret read it alone. For the first time, she couldn't call anyone to make it disappear. She waited, for allies, for defenders, for outrage. None came. People don't protect fallen power. They step away from it. Margaret came to the house, unannounced. Older, smaller. She didn't insult me. She pleaded. You don't understand, she said. I did this for us. I looked at her. You did it to us. There's a difference. She turned to him. Tears. Real this time. I made you who you are. Daniel shook, then said something I never expected. No, he said. You decided who I wasn't allowed to be. That sentence ended her grip. Margaret left without another word. No drama, just the sound of a door closing. And this time, it stayed closed. Investigations continued. Assets redistributed. Accounts returned.
Slowly. Correctly. I received what was mine, not as revenge, as restoration. Power doesn't scream. It convinces you that you don't have any, until you remember. We didn't separate immediately, but we changed. I wasn't shrinking anymore, and he was finally standing. Some things can't go back to how they were. That's not failure. That's truth. Margaret lost control of everything, except one thing, the narrative, and she wasn't done trying to rewrite it. Margaret's last move didn't come with lawyers, it came with sympathy. She sat across from a journalist she'd once sponsored. Soft lighting, carefully chosen words. I made mistakes, she said. I trusted too much. I tried to hold my family together. She never said my name. She didn't have to. People filled in the blanks. For a moment, the world leaned toward her again. I didn't panic. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't defend myself. Because the truth was already documented, and documents don't argue. They wait. 2 days later, a second article appeared. Same outlet, different tone. It included court filings, audit summaries, direct quotes from rulings. No emotion, just facts. Margaret didn't comment. She couldn't. My father never gave interviews, never issued statements. He only asked me one question. Are you finished? Not with her, with the version of myself that thought silence was survival. Yes, I said.
And I meant it. Daniel and I sat at the kitchen table. No anger, no blame, just honesty. We realized something painful. We didn't build our marriage together. We lived inside hers. So we ended it. Cleanly, respectfully. Some endings are losses. This one was release. I moved out. Not because I had to, but because I wanted a space that had never known control. I chose light, small rooms, open windows. Freedom doesn't need square footage. She lives quietly. No boards, no influence, no audience. Power didn't leave her with noise. It left her with absence. Not money, not property. My name, my voice, my timing. Control works best when you think you deserve it. Freedom begins the moment you stop apologizing for wanting more. My husband's mother took everything to control me. She just didn't know. My father taught me how to wait, and I learned how to walk away.